سلام دحنديكم كميت عنا مسخم زلخو حوخم ملجيتا طعمزجي كاب إسرائيل ما أجر مسمع أجر كسكسة يوتيوب يخم زلخم نلوم يحزلكم يتزلخو دما بهتوت كتستوعلوا تأنزل لكم دما خمزلوا وقت كبروا زي كونس تشيك جيركم نتايد بهالفتشكم تنعهم زمثلكم نعهم كأزربحكم بتلسخم تزردكم نعهم استعملكم مجدي متان نهيوتكم مفتاحات كترخبوا لي سلازي كل جزء أنا زاربو نزح حبرتسبنا بأنصارو خطبعو خطنكاك هلون وزعلم زي آخر راجت كبرتع توادا دارك خون بر فتيمة بزخون يكون ملكعي حبرتسبنا نتايد بالخون رؤوس خادنن ويك أخ شباب بتقبل كشغل جلا إلى زم صوتخون يكون حبرتات يلا سون لما أنتي كم زرع خمو ما أتصلتها أتي نايز حلف قدمي كل تسومنا بيلو نابور حاجتي خيدالو أتي سيليكون فالي زبهال بنك كراش كوينو ويكا بطعم وديو خمس نبرة ماليا زي بيقولوا انتايد بهال كسارة خمسة قات أمور ينانيرنا سلازي كم أتصلتها ناتود ما أمريكا أرنو تصبياتون جن أب هيوتا كم زعينت كل طرف زلو خجت ما زي حسبتو نجر جن بزن حموشته هاجرات تجبروا زلوا الديل درجة أمريكا نقدر كبلاز خيل بفلاي ما نتنا عالمنا جنزب صيروا زلوا دولار نبزيرو خورو دوز خيل بما عليها زي يقولهم ناي كالكالا ويكا ناي قطبة كيلاتات ويناي فاينانس كيلاتات بزاربو زلوا دولار أبزحت روان كود مخانيم زاربو زلوا دولار تودي أخا كلهم بنكتات خسرين مالتي مغناتو تي عالم لخوي بنك ويكات سنترال بنك زبالون نتيجة وزلوا أنت يدبال قدم كميس أستات كابسوس شخص ميتي عمته I'm not quite sure زنبرة أنت ينيرو جولد ويكازي أنت يدبال زي وركي يوم زقمتون يروم وتجنزب أقطع من هذا إنفليشن أقطع مو خسارات أقطع مو قلة ملس أكندو وركي سلزلوا منعو أنت يدبال جرمسي جنزب كخمول الفركات زخل protection ويحسنه نيرويم حججن دحار عبزي قدمي 6 عامت 5 عامت كبابي بتنا أمريكا زنبرة منجستي حدش ونايجزار وسوم حقي نزع على موتهم بعلهم كم دس زبالهم زحتمو نسوم زقاط أروه سنترال بانك يجرم أب سنترال بانك دما ورك زي كون زقمتس جنزب دولار كم زقمت جرم مالتي سلزي إتو حسنا نايز عالمنا تصنع أقصى حجي درجة 6% كارنسي نعلمنا ويكا جنزبنا عالمنا دولار يتصنعه سلزي إذا تصنحلو ندات تصنح خلو حجين تاي قاتيميو حجي قاتيمو زلو روسيا، تشاينا، إنديا، برازيل، ساوث أفريقيا حموشت إنزين انتا جيرن لينك أسيرن ويكا كالكيدان أسيرن بحنسام نخسر حمالتي بحنسام نخسر حتى رايكا يكونن تشاينا انتا جير الله مس أمونغو سعود عربن أمونغو إيرانن زنبرة ناي سوني شيعة زنبرة أمونغو توم حدا عين أسلام جنك أخلتا عين الشيعان مسلم زبهالو زنبرة بأسي بأمريكا زي كونس بتشاينا ختعاركم كإلا مالتي سلازي تشاينا نعوم بمعراقة انترفير جيرا أنصار أمريكا حدا نقدميت زخدت له ويكاز تزغول حتى له ينيرو كم رأينا يزيد ما سعود عرب مس تشاينا نتصع زخونه تزبزح أويل ويكا زيتي نعلمنا بسعود عرب كم زلوا زي تسعته ويبلني سلازي يتي زنبر أجريمنت مس أمريكا مس تشاينا نخسر حط راي ليكونس كسر حط راي ليكونس بدولار زنبر زعدقس ناب هن ناي تايد بازي تشاينا كتغيرس بناي تشاينا جنزب نخخون بوقعو تقاتل لا مالتيو سلازي إذا زخطلو دما قطبا ناي أمريكا أبزحت رأوان نخدخم يقبرو إي مالتيو حجي إذن حموشتا هاجرات كم نفلتن كل انتن دحر أمريكا تسريعا زلوها بزعابي قطرين مالتيو كم زيلو خلو إذن دحر دا نحيل ندابرتع خيدو زغنتات كأن دا تغيروني خيط سلازلو مودة أتوخمت زخل أتي أمريكا تقاطرو زي تخيل نمولو هزب عالم دما جنزو بودي تزلو وسيطات بدولار تتمينو ناي دولار بانكينج سيستم سلازنحي دارجا ماليا زي بلن بانكتات كابسرح وطاق خونين أب بانك زنبرو جنزبات ون إنفليشن أقاتيمو والحانت زي ربح خمزي نايبع السودان بخشا حيسكا خيطكا بان زي تغزلو خون خيلي مالتي to that extent يو حدقا كم زلوا يمززاربو زيادة نعو انتاي دبها نعو انتاي دبها الذي وحسنا زخوننا ويكا نعو منش زخوننا كلتا فيديو كاتاتي لأبزيا كسدلكم يخصام ودعتا تسمعون ሕጂ ክነግረኩም ደልየ ዘለኹ ስጥራይ ደይኮነ እንታይ ድበሃል ኮርያን እንደገና ቻይናን ከዓ ማልያ ዘይብሎም ኮማንዶ ማለት ኮማንዶታት ናተን ናብ ንሩስያ ንክሕግዛ ናብ እንታይ ድበሃል ነዚኦም ዩክሬን ንክሃርማ ተዳልዮም ተወዲኦም ኣለዉ ማለት እዩ እዚ ማለት እንታይ እዩ ኣሜሪካ ከዓ ናብ ታይዋን እንታይ ድበሃል ገንዘብ እዚ ማልያ ዘይብሉ ዊፐንስ ወይ እዚ ዕጥቅታት ናብኡ ሰዲዳላ ማለት ስለዚ ኣሜሪካ ንቻይና بتايد بتايوان جرا تايد كتجبر كتواجهت حسب الله تشاينا خا مس يوكرين كوينا خا زي سوري مس كوريا خوينا خا ناب تايد ناب روسيا نختحجز تداليا ودي الله كوماندات هتخسلوك سلازي تي سوبر باور نا عالمنا زنبره نام مغيارو قص يخيد اززم صو ነገር ድማ بفلاي امريكا اب حدغا خطوا زخليو تنكو زترفا ድማ ت ناي ويبنز ወይ ካቲ ልዑል ዝኾነ ዓቕሙ ናይ ኩናት ተፅዋር ጥራይ እዩ ስለዚ ካብኡ ሓሊፉ ግን እቲ ዝዓበየ ናታ ዓቕሚ ድዩ ወላ ካፓሲቲ ዝነበረ ዶላር ግን ክወርድ እዩ ማለት እዩ ስለዚ ምናልባት እውን ኣይ ዶንት ኖ ትሕቲ ናይ በዓል ሩስያን ገለን ክኸውን እዩ ማለት እዩ ስለዚ ስፍቶ ኮይኑ ከዓ ወላ ሓደ ዳርጋ ዘይጠቅም ገንዘብ እንዳኾነ ይኽእል ማለት እዩ እዚ ዝኸተሎ ብፍላይ ንሕና እቶም መብዛሕቲና ዞም ሕብረተሰብና ዳርጋ ካብቲ ዜና ካብቲ ሓቀኛ ዝኾነ ፍልጠት እውን ቁርብ እሊልና ስለ ዘለና مبزحتي خا أب بانك زقم تنبر كبانك وتيو أب كريبتو ديو أب إيثيريوم ديو وي أب بورك ديو بألماس ديو بقال ديو أب زخونة بنتاير بهناي بيزنس تريدينج زلسي زيرو 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 نت بحد حدا قال تراي يلا ندرجع بهالبزغلي سلازي بليز كنا نكحلنا انتايهم تقبروا نتي فلايتهم دولار زلكم سبعة ويتم أبناء دولار بانك تتقمتكم زلهم انتاي يخم تقبروا انتاي عينة وسانة وسنو ناتكمي أنا زما ناي فاينانس أمخاري كونكن تزلوا حبريتا تزلوا زينا كم زلوا يقربوا لكم اللغو نستجنزبكم دما قد مخنات كتدالوا لزقبكم كم زطعمكم كم أنا نطعم زطعمن نابراين هوتين بتن عايز تعمل تدالي يلو زلغو سخونكا انتاي كتدالوا لزقبكم كا نعاهم خون إذا ما نتجن إذا سلازبالكم تجنقلوا إذا سلازبالكم ون تايد بحال تخونوا له قالنا زخون يكون نجار كله يبلون مخناتوس جاست أنا حسابي هي بلغو أنا تصفلت ما هي اللغو تي تايد بحال حسابي زرقي حلغو سخون كا نايم مرمار عقمهم بعابي خا كذا زقات خجات الشجرات اللي تساقمات اللي خمي يجركم توقفها ناتكم سقمتي يوز خون مالتي سلازي نزخ لكم إليه حجي كل الفيديو تنزل كسدلكم نعم أنت خاتات الوانهم كسامو داتا نتصور زخنا حبريت هذا ما أب إنك ترخبوا يقوم مالتيو سسنايو تنيلكم سلسمعكم بتعميد مسكنكم بليز بزتخ على متنجم بجاهم توم في اللاين عاي فلو تقبروني تتابعوني تصبغ زخنا أنت إذا بهالفتوات دي خبرة اللي زلكم أبي حوات أوداتكم أوالدكم بزتخ على متنا بكل نخبات صح شر قبروا بتخاتات على أنا وأنت تتابعي حدشتي نقرات زلو متان كقرب لكم نتيجة زي يتصايبي بمالتي لذي سسنايو كلنا نات حاجة جزنا سبسكرايب شير كومنت لايك أي تحمقوا سسنايو أبذل لكم سلامكم يبزحلي.
This is Richard Wolff from Democracy at Work, responding to another Ask Prof. Wolff question from our Patreon community. And this one comes from David. And again, I've chosen it from the questions you've been sending because a number of you have asked similar questions. It's about the dollar, the US dollar. And it's about whether the dollar is losing its primacy in the world. And more importantly, if it is, because it is, what are the implications? What does it mean for the United States? Will there be a collapse? What are the other consequences? Very important question. So let me begin by assuring you that yes, the dollar is losing its primacy. There really is no question about this. The disagreement is how fast this process is going and will go, not about whether it will happen, except for a few, mostly on the right wing of political thinking, but even the most steadfast supporters of capitalism and supporters of the United States are able to see that the dollar is literally losing its global position. And what was that global position? Well, it was the dominant currency of the world. pretty much since the end of the Second World War. So that's 75 years and counting. In many countries, the dollar exists as a currency alongside of, or in some cases, instead of that country's currency. Central banks around the world use dollars as part of their reserve alongside gold and other valuable things to show that they can support their currency. And the more the world needs and uses dollars, the more the United States has enjoyed an impeccable economic gain from that. First of all, we give the world dollars in exchange for something. We don't just hand it out. We get something as a nation, as an economy. For example, if we import goods and services and pay for them with dollars, we get something that is worth the work that went into it. The French wine, the Chinese consumer goods, the Indian technology products, and all we give them is cheap little pieces of paper, dollar bills, $100 bills, or the electronic equivalent. It's a wonderful way to get the wealth produced around the world and to give in exchange merely a claim on some wealth that may never be actually demanding something because they use the dollars and buy them and sell them and keep them. Many of the people around the world use the dollars that they accept in exchange for the goods and services they produce to lend those dollars back to the United States government, thereby funding our wars and many of our ongoing governmental activities. And why is that important? Because that allows the government not to tax Americans, but instead to borrow the money from all those who have dollars and are willing to lend it. So the benefits to the United States have been enormous. As the dollar loses its primacy, as more and more people around the world stop using the dollar, reduce using the dollar, all those advantages and many more I don't have the time to go into are being lost. And the impact on the American economy will be large and cumulative over time. Well, then why is the dollar losing its primacy? Much of it has to do with geopolitics. To put it very bluntly and simply, other parts of the world don't want to keep having workers produce and businesses produce valuable goods and services, shipping them to the United States and getting in return dollars. They want the benefits of a currency like the United States has gotten, but they want to share it in it too by having their currency become as important as the United States. Chief among them, the Europeans with the euro, the Chinese with the yuan, and so on. And they have been acting to realize that objective. The most important steps, BRICS, a global alliance, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, with at least another 6 to 10 nations applying now to join BRICS. They want to develop a non-dollar based trade among them. And these are nearly half the population of this planet. They are talking about trading in either the Chinese currency, because that's the most powerful economy among them, or in some organized currency that they set up for this purpose. That's the most tangible change. Here's another one. Literally a few days ago, the Chinese brokered an agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, overcoming the hostility and the wars between them, direct and indirect, overcoming much of the split between Shiite and Sunni Islam. They're opening embassies in each other's countries, the Iranians and the Saudis. And please be aware that Saudi Arabia is the largest producer of oil in the world and is now closer to China, with whom it is trading more and more than it used to be with the United States. That shift is crucial. Trade in oil used to be done in dollars, requiring everyone to keep and hold dollars. China and Saudi Arabia are discussing what they call the petro-yuan, that is, trade in oil denominated in the Chinese currency. The value of the dollar in relationship to other currencies is therefore likely going to fall in the years ahead. That will make imports into the United States, which we now depend on, much more expensive. It will therefore also drive up the price of those imports, and that will be an inflationary boost when the United States needs it least. We will become more and more of an exporter. As our dollar goes down in value, our goods become cheaper for people buying the devalued dollar. It will shift our economy around. Those shifts are always difficult. They may, if they're not properly prepared for, not properly managed, produce a crisis. And it could be as serious as the crisis that threatens from the collapse of the American banking system in recent weeks. So yeah, it is a dangerous, or it could be, but it is more a long-term readjustment of the world that Americans having a hard time getting their heads around. We are not the dominant player in the world today as we were for most of the last century. That is over. And more important than anything is to come to terms with that reality, because it is becoming truer and truer with each passing week.
Well, I'm going to tell you what happened this week, which I think is an absolute game changer for U.S. monetary policy and, frankly, global power structure. You know, we've been talking about the New World Order, what that's going to look like. The United States and the globalists that run the World Economic Forum want what they call a unipolar order, right? One sort of globalist cabal that's running the show. Well, there are other countries that have a different opinion of that and do not believe that we should have a unipolar order. They want a multipolar order, that every country, territory, land, customs, cultures are all different. You're really going to run what happens in Russia and Canada and Brazil with one government run out of Brussels, right? Doesn't make any sense. But that's what the globalists want. They also want a one world sort of digital currency that they control everything. Again, other countries have a different opinion of that, and they don't think that globalists should be running the show. And you're seeing the U.S. dollar in the middle of all of this being crushed as a result. So what happened this week? Well, a couple of big moving pieces. First of all, Moscow was probably the biggest story in the world, but of course the mainstream media in the United States wants you to focus on other stories. They want you to focus on, Donald Trump being arrested or whatever reality TV show issue is going on right now, or the Academy Awards or whatever. No. The biggest story in the world happened in Moscow this week. Chinese President Xi Jinping flew into Moscow, met with Vladimir Putin. They met for 3 days, and they wrote up and documented 14 different signed agreements. 14 of them. They met for hours every day. And when they left, they said, "We are about to change the world order," shook hands and said, "Goodbye, my friend." It was an unbelievable summit if you're paying attention to what's happening in the world right now. Now, remember about a year ago when President Biden flew into Saudi Arabia and was basically mocked. And when they left, it was well reported that they were laughing at him when he left. He was begging them to not cut production of oil and, create new oil partnerships with the United States. They basically looked right in his face and said, "No, we're not going to do that." So what happened this week? Well, these 14 agreements that Vladimir Putin signed with Xi Jinping are about trade, the economy, currency, about military exercises. The list is pretty much endless. New rail infrastructure, trade routes, etc. But to me, the biggest story was about settling oil transactions and making trade transactions settled with the Chinese currency, the yuan, okay, instead of U.S. dollars. The same thing happened in Saudi Arabia this week. Saudi Arabia discussing with China, Saudi Arabia talking with China about settling their oil transactions with the Chinese currency yuan. Okay, so that might not sound like much to the layperson, but when the petrodollar, the US dollar, which is how all oil transactions are settled, now will be upended and removed, and oil will now be settled with the Chinese yuan, that is a game changer. Arguably the biggest story we've seen in decades.
The fact that oil has always been traded in dollars, if that were to end, that would mean the end of the U.S. dollar.
Why is that? The U.S. uses the dollar as a cudgel. It uses it as an axe. It uses it to put sanctions on other countries. Oh, we want you to do this. We want you to act a certain way. So we will use the U.S. dollar to sanction you. You want oil? Well, it's because it's the petrodollar. You want to settle your oil transactions? You have to do it in the U.S. dollar. You better listen to us with our sanctions.
The world's second largest economy and its largest energy exporter are together actively trying to dent the dollar's dominance as the anchor of the international financial system. Will they succeed? The dollar is America's last surviving superpower. It gives Washington unrivaled economic and political muscle. It can slap sanctions on countries unilaterally, which frees that country out of large parts of the world economy. And Washington can spend freely, certain that its debt will be bought up by the rest of the world.
That's what we do. Now imagine if we remove the US dollar from oil transactions. Well, what happens? The US cudgel of sanctions starts to move away, starts to dissolve, and U.S. power is dissolving. And that's why you're seeing this week, over the past 48 hours, the United States ramping up, wanting to increase their military budget by 40% to attack China. These are the words, literally, from our defense secretary, that we're adding 40% to our defense budget for readying for war with China. This is why. It all comes down to the U.S. dollar. It's about nothing else. It's not about Chinese soldiers showing up in your backyard and trying to steal your pool toys. No, it's about the economy. It's about the power of the US dollar versus the Chinese yuan. And it's about a new global power alliance. So folks, pay attention to what's happening here. In fact, we had one of our team members, our bookkeeper, even reached out to us this morning and said, my husband and I are very concerned about what's about to happen. If Saudi Arabia switches from the US dollar to the Chinese yuan, what does that mean for the US dollar? We've been warning you here on the show what's happening to the US dollar. All you need to do is look at what Jerome Powell just announced this week, right? Which is a rate increase. Okay, a small rate increase, but then Fed watchers are seeing that we're going to see rate cuts in June and December. That means they're throwing their hands up saying, we don't know what to do anymore. We're done. We're going to let the market sort itself out. What that means is that investors are leaving the US dollar. They're going to go to internationally to something more that are going to yield higher results instead of U.S. treasuries and bonds. We're going to get out of the U.S. dollar. We're going to go into other territories. So you're seeing now the decline, the buying power of the U.S. dollar plummeting. Is your retirement tied to the U.S. dollar? This is all you need to be asking yourselves. Like when you're sitting around the dinner table with your husband or wife, say to yourself, is my retirement account tied to the U.S. dollar? What that means is that these companies, these stock market companies that you're invested in, right, Ford, et cetera, are their profits going to go down because the U.S. buying power is declining? Therefore, people are going to have less money in the United States. We are heading into a recession. That means these corporate profits that you're relying on for your stock values of your 401k to go up, arguably are going to go down, right, in my opinion. I mean, you can look at what's happening, right? If these companies are laying off thousands of people and people aren't buying their stuff, how are their profits going to go up and their stock goes up and your retirement account goes up? The answer is it's not. So where are you going to put your money? Again, I talk about real estate on this channel. If you want to book a call with our team, again, real estate, we're only building about 500 homes this year. So it's not like we have like millions we can help people with. But if you're someone who is interested in investing in real estate, you can book a call with our team and we can help you in that. Also, I recommend, personally, I recommend gold and silver and things like that. Actual tangible assets. Real estate is the top of my list. Gold, silver, those three. That's it for me, right? That's like the list for me. And I have a little bit of Bitcoin. But those are the tangible assets that have sustained for thousands of years. So again, if your retirement account is tied to what the US dollar is doing, buyer beware. Protect your family. I don't care what you do. I don't care if you buy eggs. I care that you don't get screwed. That's all I care about. I really, really do.